It was a cold, grey afternoon in London when Emma stepped inside their apartment. The city outside was shrouded in a thick layer of fog, the kind that made everything feel distant and muffled. Emma had just returned from a long, tiring day at work, and her feet ached as she walked through the door, hoping for some comfort. The apartment, usually filled with warmth and light, was unusually quiet. It was as though the space itself was holding its breath. She hung her coat in the hallway, glancing around. The faint sound of the television reached her ears, but it didn't offer the usual sense of peace. Instead, it seemed to highlight the silence, the unease that had been creeping into their relationship for the past few weeks. "James," she called out softly, stepping toward the living room. Her husband was sitting on the couch, his back slouched, staring blankly at the screen. His eyes weren't focused on anything in particular. His fingers, usually steady, drummed anxiously against the armrest. Emma could feel the tension radiating off him, and for a split second, she thought about turning around and leaving the room. But something stopped her. She walked up to him, standing by the sofa for a moment, unsure of what to say. Her heart was heavy, sensing the distance that had grown between them. It wasn't the first time she had noticed it, his distant gaze, the conversations that had grown shorter, the laughter that no longer filled their home. She had felt this coldness in the air for weeks, but she had hoped it was just a phase. "James," she asked again, her voice laced with concern. He looked up, blinking as if he hadn't realized she was there. His eyes seemed distant, like he was looking at her but not truly seeing her. "Oh, hey, you're back," he muttered, his voice stiff, not like the warmth she was used to. Emma sat beside him, the space between them feeling larger than it ever had before. She gently placed her hand over his, her fingers brushing against his skin. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated, his hand pulling away from hers for a moment. "Yeah, just work stuff," he replied quickly, his eyes not quite meeting hers. But Emma wasn't convinced. She had known James long enough to tell when something wasn't right. "James," she pressed, her voice firm but gentle, "what's really going on? I know you, and I can tell when something's bothering you." For a long time, he said nothing. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Emma waited, her heart racing. She wasn't sure what she expected, but whatever it was, she wasn't prepared for what came next. "I think I need Viagra," he said, his words so blunt they struck her like a physical blow. Emma froze. Her mind went blank for a moment as the words echoed in her head. She blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "Viagra," she repeated, her voice shaking slightly. "What do you mean? Why would you need that?" He shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. "I don't know. I just feel like I'm not enough. I've been struggling with everything, and I thought maybe this would help. I feel like I've been failing you, and I don't know how to fix it." Emma's chest tightened. She had expected many things, but not this. She had been waiting for him to open up, to tell her the truth about whatever it was that had been hanging between them. But this felt different. This wasn't just about his physical health, this was about something much deeper, something she hadn't been prepared to face. For a moment, Emma didn't know what to say. Her thoughts were spinning, trying to make sense of everything. She had always thought their marriage was strong, that the love between them was unshakable. But now, doubt began to creep in. Was this truly just about his struggles with intimacy, or was there something else at play here? "James," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "is this about us? Or is it something more?" James avoided her gaze, staring at the floor as if he couldn't bear to meet her eyes. "I don't know," he mumbled. I think it's everything. I've been feeling disconnected from you, from everything. And I thought, maybe this would fix it." Emma's heart sank. She wanted to scream, to demand the truth from him, but instead, she sat in silence, the weight of his confession settling heavily on her chest. Something wasn't right, and she knew it. But what could she do? She wasn't sure how to fix it, and perhaps that was the most frightening part of all. As the minutes passed, Emma stayed there, beside him, her mind racing with questions. She wanted to believe him, to trust him, but deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Something was hiding beneath the surface, and she wasn't sure she was ready to uncover it. But she would have to, whether she was ready or not. Because what Emma didn't know yet was that the truth would come from someone she never expected. And it would change everything. The days that followed were filled with an uneasy silence. Emma found herself walking on eggshells, unsure of what to say, how to act, or even how to feel. The distance between her and James seemed to grow with each passing day, as if the gap between them was becoming a canyon too wide to cross. She tried to be supportive, to act as though everything was fine, but deep down, she knew it wasn't. James became more withdrawn, his eyes constantly focused on his phone or the TV, as though he was searching for something outside of their home. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something, but what? She wanted to believe that the Viagra confession was a cry for help, a sign that he still cared about their relationship, but every day, it felt like that was slipping further away. The more she watched him, the more the questions started to pile up in her mind. Late one evening, Emma came home early, hoping to catch him in a moment of vulnerability. As she stepped inside, she heard the sound of muffled voices coming from the living room. At first, she thought it was the TV, but something about it felt different. It was too intimate, too personal. Curiosity piqued, she walked quietly down the hallway, her footsteps soft on the hardwood floors. As she peered around the corner into the living room, her breath caught in her throat. There, on the couch, was James, not alone as she expected, but with a woman. She couldn't make out the details from where she stood, but the closeness between them was undeniable. The woman was laughing softly, her head tilted toward James, and he was laughing too, his eyes lighting up in a way Emma hadn't seen in weeks. For a split second, Emma's heart stopped. Was this the reason for the distance? Was James seeing someone else? Her mind raced, and panic set in as she stood frozen in the doorway, too stunned to move. Suddenly, the woman's voice cut through the tension. "You know, you've really changed, James," she said, her tone playful, but Emma could hear the underlying familiarity in her words. "I never thought I'd see you like this." James chuckled softly, but Emma couldn't bring herself to stay and listen any longer. She turned on her heel and rushed out of the apartment, her heart pounding in her chest. She needed air, she needed space to process what she had just witnessed. The image of James with another woman burned in her mind, and no matter how hard she tried to shake it off, the feeling of betrayal settled deep in her stomach. She found herself walking aimlessly through the streets of London, not knowing where she was going or what she was searching for. Her thoughts were a whirlwind, confusion, anger, sadness, all blending together in a dizzying mix. How could James do this to her? Had she been blind to the signs? Had he been seeing this woman for longer than she realized? After what felt like hours, Emma found herself standing in front of a small cafe, the warm light spilling out onto the pavement. She stepped inside, not even thinking about what she was doing, and took a seat at the farthest table. The place was quiet, the only sound being the clink of cups and the soft murmur of conversation. Emma barely noticed it all, her mind was consumed with the image of James and the woman. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her out of her thoughts. She pulled it out, her heart sinking when she saw that it was a message from James. "Where are you?" The message was simple, but the words hit her harder than she expected. He was looking for her, as though nothing had happened, as though everything was fine. Emma stared at the screen for a moment, unsure of what to do next. Should she reply? Should she confront him? Or was it better to let him stew in his own guilt? She set the phone down on the table, her hands trembling. The truth was, she didn't know what to do. She had never felt more lost. She had always believed in James, in their relationship, but now everything felt like a lie. The woman, the laughter, the secrecy, what had it all meant? As the evening wore on, Emma sat alone in the cafe, lost in her thoughts. She knew one thing for certain, something had to change. She couldn't keep living in this uncertainty, in this quiet betrayal. But she didn't know how to fix it. All she knew was that the man she had once trusted with her heart was no longer the man she thought he was. The following morning, Emma woke up in a daze on the sofa of her best friend's flat in Camden. She had turned up late the night before, pale-faced and trembling, and Maisie, ever the anchor in her life, had taken one look at her and ushered her inside without a single question. They had stayed up talking until dawn, though Emma had revealed only fragments, enough for Maisie to hold her, brew tea, and mutter fierce curses about men who didn't deserve women like Emma. Now, as the soft sunlight spilled across the kitchen tiles, Emma sipped her coffee and stared blankly out the window. Her phone lay face down on the table. 10 unread messages from James. A few missed calls. But no explanation. No apology. Maisie broke the silence. You need to know who she is, Em. Emma didn't respond. I'm serious. You saw something. You felt something. Your gut's screaming for a reason. Find out who she is before you let him spin some polished version of the truth. Emma finally looked up. Her face was tired, but her voice was firm. You're right. By midday, she returned to the flat she shared with James. He wasn't home, which was a small mercy. She paced through the rooms, everything painfully familiar, yet suddenly foreign. She moved to the bookshelf and reached behind the third shelf, pulling out the spare phone James had once used for work. She wasn't proud of what she was about to do, but something deep inside her told her this wasn't the time to play fair. She powered it on, hands slightly shaking. No lock. That alone startled her. It was either laziness or confidence. Within moments, she was scrolling through old texts. Most were boring. Work-related. Logistics. But then, tucked between business names, she found a contact saved only as V. Emma tapped on the name. Her chest tightened as the screen filled with message threads, months of conversation. They were careful, subtle, but not enough to hide the truth. V was Vera. That name came up again and again, always cloaked in vague sentences like, last night was just what I needed, or, same time Friday. Phrases that, in context, painted a picture clearer than any photograph. Then came the photos. Casual selfies. One of Vera blowing a kiss to the camera from what looked like their living room. Another of her sitting in James's car, wearing his hoodie. Emma dropped the phone. Her heart thundered in her ears. So this was it. Vera wasn't a mystery anymore, she was real. She existed. She had invaded their life, their home, their space. For a moment, Emma couldn't breathe. She walked to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She looked different. Older. Not in years, but in the weight she carried behind her eyes. This betrayal had aged her. Suddenly, the door creaked. Emma turned sharply. James stood at the door, holding his keys in one hand and a bag of groceries in the other. His eyes widened as he saw her, but he quickly masked his surprise. You're back, he said cautiously, stepping inside. Emma straightened. Who is Vera? The silence that followed was so heavy it nearly knocked her over. James froze. His knuckles went white around the bag handle. Emma. Don't lie to me, James. I saw the messages. I saw the pictures. He slowly set the bag down, his shoulders slumping. There was no out. No denial. No escape. He looked up at her, his expression unreadable. She means nothing, he said, almost too quickly. Emma laughed, bitter, sharp. She's in our house. Wearing your clothes. She's in our life, James. He stepped forward. It's over. I ended it weeks ago. Her eyes narrowed. Before or after the night I saw her in this flat? He didn't answer. That was answer enough. Emma took a step back, the pain burning through her like fire. I gave you everything, James. Every bit of trust one had left. And you handed it to someone else. He ran a hand through his hair, his voice breaking. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did. Her voice was calm now, dangerously calm. She turned and walked towards the bedroom. She wasn't running. She wasn't breaking. She was planning. This story was far from over. The night was thick with silence. Emma lay awake in bed, not next to James, but in the guest room. She had locked the door, though she doubted he would dare approach. Not tonight. Not after the fire that had sparked in her eyes. James had tried knocking once, softly, muttering her name through the wood, but her silence had been louder than any scream. Eventually, he gave up. Emma stared at the ceiling. Every beat of her heart echoed like thunder. She could feel the storm building inside her. And this time, she wouldn't drown in it, she would ride it. By morning, she had made her decision. She dressed in black. Not for mourning, but for clarity. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a woman reclaiming her life, step by step. She left the flat without a word to James, phone in hand, the screenshots of Vera's messages saved safely in her gallery. Her first stop was her solicitor's office in Kensington. She wasn't married to James, but they shared a lease, a car, joint investments. Untangling it all would be messy, but necessary. She spoke firmly, with grace and focus. No tears. No breakdowns. The woman sitting across the desk was no longer the trusting partner, she was the strategist. From there, she went to the bank. She'd worked hard for her savings. Many of the accounts were in her name, but James had access to one of them, the one meant for their wedding fund. She transferred every penny out. Her hands were steady. Her voice, calm. Then, she visited her mother. Emma hadn't said much to her yet, but as soon as she walked through the door, Mrs. Whitmore wrapped her daughter in a long, silent hug. No questions. No pressure. Just presence. Over tea, Emma finally spoke. Mum, I need to stay here for a while. Her mother simply nodded. You'll always have a home here. Emma took a deep breath. She felt like she had been holding it for weeks. The warm scent of lavender, the ticking of the old clock on the mantel, everything grounded her. Her childhood home, nestled in the quiet of Richmond, suddenly became her sanctuary. By late afternoon, she was on her laptop, digging. Not through messages this time, but through Vera's life. It wasn't hard to find her. A public Instagram account, of course. Vera was the type who couldn't resist a mirror selfie. There she was, posing in James's car, holding his hand in a blurry shot at what looked like a bar in Soho. But what caught Emma's eye was something else entirely. One video, posted just 2 days ago, showed Vera giggling while unwrapping a gift. The caption read, "He said I deserved something shiny. He's so sweet." Emma paused the video. The box was unmistakable. Navy blue velvet, tied with a gold ribbon. The same brand James had mentioned weeks ago when he said he was just browsing for Emma's birthday. Her jaw clenched. He had given her the gift meant for Emma. That was it. That was the moment something inside her snapped, not into pieces, but into position. Emma wasn't going to confront Vera. She wasn't going to cause a scene. That would be too simple. Too easy. She was going to let the truth speak. Publicly. Quietly. Powerfully. The next day, she booked a meeting with a journalist. An old uni friend, now working for a lifestyle publication that thrived on modern tales of love, betrayal, and resilience. Emma handed her the story, not just the betrayal, but the cold details. Screenshots. Photos. Timelines. The lie behind the perfect couple image James liked to portray on his social media. She would remain anonymous, of course. But the truth would echo. Not with vengeance, but with intention. Not to humiliate, but to liberate. That night, she received a text from James. "Can we talk?" She didn't reply. Instead, she poured herself a glass of wine, stepped into the garden, and looked up at the stars. For the first time in a long time, she felt weightless. She wasn't broken. She was becoming. And James had no idea what was coming next. The morning the article went live, the air in London felt different, crisp and brimming with anticipation. Emma woke up to the scent of toast drifting from the kitchen. Her mum was humming softly to herself, unaware of the storm that was about to unfold across phone screens and coffee shop whispers. The article was titled, "Behind the Facade, a Love Story Gone Rotten." It was raw, honest, and laced with undeniable evidence. Screenshots. Messages. The image of Vera wearing the necklace James had claimed he couldn't afford for Emma. All of it, laid out with precision. Emma hadn't named James directly. But anyone who knew them, anyone who followed them on social media, would connect the dots in seconds. Within hours, the post had gone viral. By noon, James's name was trending on local forums. Gossip pages were dissecting the timeline. His followers dropped by the dozens. Comments piled up beneath his last romantic post with Emma, full of feigned affection. Words like disgusting, manipulative, two-faced. Emma didn't check any of it. She didn't need to. She already knew the story was no longer just hers, it belonged to every woman who'd ever been deceived by a smile. But James? He was unraveling. At precisely 3:14 p.m., her phone buzzed. It was him. She let it ring. Then again. And again. He left voicemails, his voice cracked, panicked. "Emma, please, this is all a misunderstanding. We need to talk. You've got it all wrong." She played them once, quietly, then deleted them without a word. Later that evening, he showed up at her mother's house. Emma watched him from the upstairs window as he stood outside the front gate, pacing, gripping his phone like it could save him. Mrs. Whitmore stepped outside, calm and steady. "You need to leave," she said, not unkindly, but firmly. "I need to speak to her. She doesn't want to see you. I deserve a chance to explain." Mrs. Whitmore tilted her head. And she deserved honesty. You gave her neither. He didn't argue. He just stood there, as if waiting for the earth to crack open and swallow him whole. Emma watched him walk away. It wasn't satisfying. It wasn't triumphant. It was quiet. Just the end of something that never should have lasted so long. But things were just beginning for Vera. The exposure had drawn attention, not just to James, but to her. Comments under her posts grew uglier by the minute. She turned her account private, but not before someone captured screenshots of her bragging about her taken boyfriend. Emma hadn't expected that part. She didn't want a public takedown. She just wanted the lies to stop echoing through her life. But now, the world had a taste for blood. Her old friends began messaging her again, people she hadn't spoken to in months. Words of support. Encouragement. Even apologies. But Emma didn't reply to most of them. Because she wasn't looking for sympathy. She was rebuilding. The story reached her workplace by the end of the week. Her manager pulled her aside. "We've read the article," he said cautiously. Emma tensed. But we want you to know, your strength was evident in every line. If you need time, we understand. If you want to talk, my door's open. Emma exhaled, slowly. Gratitude surged through her, not because people finally saw her side, but because for once, she had told it on her own terms. On Friday, a small box arrived at her mother's home. No note. Just a plain, white box with a navy blue ribbon. Emma didn't need to open it to know what it was. The necklace. Returned. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She took the box, walked out to the garden, and buried it in the soil beneath the old rose bush. Some things didn't deserve a place in her new life. That night, she stared out the window as the moonlight bathed the garden in silver. She was no longer waiting for closure. She had created it. A week passed. James had vanished from the spotlight, his social media stripped clean. His once polished image, built over years of curated smiles and sweet captions, had crumbled overnight. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, weighted with the consequences of his deception. Emma, however, didn't revel in it. She had started a new routine, quiet walks in Hyde Park before work, black coffee from the corner cafe, evenings spent journaling instead of scrolling. For the first time in months, her life wasn't revolving around someone else's needs or moods. It was hers, entirely. And yet, something tugged at her thoughts, Vera. Unlike James, Vera had tried to defend herself. In a now-deleted post, she had claimed she didn't know James was still with Emma. But Emma remembered the look in her eyes that night in the hotel lobby, the smirk, the calculated confidence. Vera had known. She had enjoyed it. But revenge wasn't Emma's goal. Truth was. And now that the truth had been spoken, all that remained was her next chapter. One Thursday morning, as Emma was returning from the gym, a sleek black car pulled up just outside her building. At first, she didn't notice. London was full of dark cars and wealthy passengers. But then the window rolled down. Vera. Dressed in designer from head to toe, oversized sunglasses hiding most of her face. But Emma would recognize her anywhere. Vera leaned slightly out. Can we talk? Emma stood still for a moment, her gym bag hanging by her side. What could you possibly have to say to me? I didn't know he was serious about you. Emma chuckled, bitterly. You thought I was a fling. I thought he was lying to both of us. Maybe he was. But you didn't care to find out, did you? Vera said nothing. You knew he had someone, Emma continued. You just assumed you were the upgrade. Silence stretched between them. Then, Vera's tone shifted, lower, uncertain. I've lost work. Clients. My manager dropped me. All because of a man who told me I was the only one. Emma didn't flinch. Maybe now you understand, she said quietly. Not because you lost those things. But because you realize what it feels like to be lied to by someone who said they adored you. Vera looked away, ashamed. Emma turned to leave. But before she reached her front door, she paused. I'm not proud of the mess. But I am proud I didn't stay quiet. That's something you'll understand one day, if you ever decide to stop competing for scraps. Vera didn't respond. The car drove off. Emma didn't look back. That night, she sat at her desk, lighting a candle as she pulled out her journal. She didn't write about James. Or Vera. She wrote about herself. The girl she used to be. The woman she was becoming. The lessons that had arrived wrapped in heartbreak and betrayal. She wrote until her hand cramped and the page was full. Then she closed the book, leaned back in her chair, and smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile for a camera or a man or a performance. It was just for her. She had reclaimed her voice. Her dignity. Her freedom. Not with grand speeches or cruel revenge. but by walking away, with grace. That was her silent victory. It arrived 3 weeks later. A small cream envelope, handwritten in neat cursive. No return address. Just her name, Emma Holloway, inked with familiarity. For a second, her heart stuttered. She knew that writing. James. She stared at it on her kitchen table, untouched. The kettle boiled behind her, the scent of Earl Grey rising in quiet curls of steam. She didn't rush to open it. In fact, she didn't even touch it until 2 hours later, after folding laundry, wiping the windowsills, and repotting the basil on her windowsill. When she finally slit the envelope open, her hands were steady. Inside was a single folded letter. Emma. I've read your post. And I know you'll never forgive me. But I need you to know. I didn't plan for this to happen. I loved you. I still do. I made the worst mistake of my life, not just in what I did, but in how I betrayed the best person I've ever known. You didn't deserve any of it. And yet, I know this letter won't change a thing. I won't ask for another chance. I know I've lost that right. I just hope one day, you'll think of me and remember the good parts too. James. Emma folded the letter calmly. There were no tears. No shaking hands. No waves of sorrow. Only a strange sense of distance, as though the woman in that letter was someone she used to be, a girl who still believed his words meant safety. She placed the letter back in the envelope, tied it with a bit of twine, and tucked it into a box at the back of her closet. It didn't belong in the bin. But it didn't deserve space on her bookshelf either. That night, she went for dinner with Freya. They laughed over too much wine and debated the merits of French films versus Spanish thrillers. They walked home arm in arm, heels in hand, the streets of London glistening beneath their feet. You seem lighter, Freya said suddenly. Emma looked up at the moon. I am, she smiled. Finally. The next morning, her phone pinged. It was a message from her editor. A new assignment. A profile piece on female resilience in the arts. It felt like the universe nodding. She accepted. And when she sat down to write the opening line, her fingers hovered for a moment before typing. Sometimes, strength isn't loud. Sometimes, it's a quiet refusal to let heartbreak define you. She leaned back. Smiled again. That line wasn't just for her article. It was for her. For the girl who once curled up on the bathroom floor, and for the woman who now chose herself, every single day. Spring returned to London with its usual quiet bloom. The air was warmer now, soft and forgiving, and the trees in Hyde Park stood proud with a fresh coat of green. Emma strolled past them one Sunday morning, her notebook under her arm and a takeaway latte warming her hand. It had been almost a year since the post went viral. Since James' betrayal unraveled in the most public, yet somehow most private, way possible. Since she rebuilt herself from the ruins of everything she thought was safe. Today, she was meeting Freya for brunch. But first, she had one final stop to make. The bench was still there. Tucked beneath a chestnut tree, slightly weathered, initials carved into its wood from 1,000 stories not her own. She sat down, breathing in the scent of damp earth and blossom. From her bag, she pulled out the small, cream envelope. James' letter. She hadn't looked at it since the day she read it. But she had carried it with her all this time. Not out of love. Not out of longing. But because she needed to be sure she'd let go completely. She read it once more, the words now weightless, like a script from someone else's play. Then, without a second thought, she tore it in half. Then in half again. And again. Until it was nothing but soft, frayed paper clutched in her fist. She stood. The wind caught the scraps, lifting them into the air, carrying them into the trees, into the grass, into the great unknown. She smiled. It was not an act of revenge. it was release. She walked away from that bench with a lightness in her step she hadn't known in years. She wasn't angry. She wasn't broken. She was done. When she met Freya at the cafe, her best friend grinned and held up 2 mimosas. To new beginnings, Freya toasted. Emma clinked her glass against hers. To truth, she said. They laughed. Later that afternoon, Emma returned home and opened her laptop. A new email waited in her inbox. An invitation to speak at a women's leadership conference. Topic: Reclaiming your story. She accepted instantly. And when she stood on the stage 3 weeks later, looking out at a sea of curious, hopeful faces, Emma didn't speak about betrayal, or heartbreak, or men who couldn't keep their promises. She spoke about courage. About dignity. And about the quiet revolution that happens when a woman chooses herself. As the applause echoed around the hall, Emma stepped off the stage, back straight, eyes bright. She wasn't just healed. She was transformed. And this was only the beginning.